Hey Kelly, how are you?
I am fantastic. How are you doing today?
Good, good. Yeah, I caught a bit of cold. I even tested myself for COVID today. It's not that, so I might be like blowing my nose in the middle of the session. I'm sorry for that.
That
But
is
other
okay.
than that,
So I
very
just
good.
want to warn you,
Mm.
uh, the AWS East Coast location in Virginia, so AWS East, which is where Zoom is hosted on,
Oh,
is having a complete conniption today. This has been happening all morning. There is a likelihood that this call might get completely cut off several times.
wow. Okay.
So if that happens, um, I don't know what our backup plan is.
Huh. Ah, I didn't see that coming.
I didn't see it coming this morning
Yeah,
either.
but
So,
thanks for the heads up. Like we could potentially move to, but if we move to Google Meet, then I don't have the premium account there, so I wouldn't be able to record it. Um, so I think if that
do
happens, we may
I?
just want to rearrange. Uh,
Yeah, if it does, I'll I'll shoot you an email if it's like irretrievable if I can't get back on. Um,
sure.
but I just wanted to warn you, like we've been having crazy problems today.
Oh wow. Okay, so it already happened. Well, fingers crossed. Maybe if it doesn't happen, maybe I don't know. Do they have other locations? Probably they do. Uh,
Yeah, hopefully they're
for
routing stuff.
hosting.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe mine's in Europe. Ah, awesome. Let's wait a bit for the participants. Okay, attendees. So, okay, I can see four people here. Hello, Caroline. Hello, Heather. Hello, Jessica. Hello, Vishal. Nice. Let's just wait a couple of minutes. Tell us, guys, where you are from. Where are you tuning in from for this? And more people joining. Yeah. Side note, this is our first interview in this series, so please forgive me for any glitches, like as Kelly just explained as well. Zoom is having some technical problems.
Yeah, a little bit, but this is
Mm.
actually very stable so far, so my hopes are high. Yeah, that's awesome. Nashville, sunny UK,
Yeah,
Nashville,
I'm in
wonderful.
sunny UK as well. uh,
I am in, you may have heard of it. I am very near Fargo, North Dakota. So you're going to hear it in my accent as I'm talking today. I cannot stop it. The movie really cut deep because it really keyed in on the fact that a lot of us do speak like that. But I'm near Fargo and I've lived here probably 25 years.
mm. Nice. So I can see more and more people are joining us. So maybe we can kind of soft start it by like letting you just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about, yeah, like what led you to product management and this career.
Yeah. So, hi, my name is Kelly Yankee Deltener. I am a product manager. And so I'm the former head of product at CoSchedule. And CoSchedule was marketing software as a service. I have a lot of formers that I was, and I can kind of talk a little bit about my career path. And like a lot of product managers, I think I like to think of myself as a unique or that I took a unique path to get here. But a lot of the product managers that I run into also did. A lot of product managers take a very unique path to get into their career. But I started out my product and project management career. So I have a project management background as well. Um, Back in the late 90s, early 2000s. So I know that ages me a little bit. But that was kind of the web development, e-commerce development, and app development boom. That's when it really started to hit its stride. And I worked with my husband and his twin brother, and we were basically sort of like an agency shop. We were making apps and websites and e-commerce retail shops for people online, of course. That's where I learned how to do project management. And that's where I've got real deep exposure into not just the process of how to develop and create websites, web applications, things of that nature. But that's where I started to learn and understand how to solve problems for users,
Mm.
which is the core. That's the core of what a product manager does, right? So after that, I bounced around the industry a little bit. After selling that business, I bounced around the industry. I worked in retail e-commerce for a company called realtruck.com. They sell aftermarket truck accessories. Say, easy for me to say. And they were a wonderful company to work with because it was almost like a startup. They went from a very modest retail income per year to multi-million dollars per year, almost seemingly overnight. That's where I learned when I was working in project management there. And I even started with like writing product descriptions there. I learned a lot about how to work in a rapid startup environment. After that, I thought, well, why don't I try my hand at something that's a little bit more traditional? So I worked in healthcare software, where I found that I learned a lot about program management and the agile software project management process, right? And so I deepened my skill set there, and I learned something that I've carried with me throughout the rest of my product management career. And that was how to interact with teams, how to manage people, and whether or not you're a direct manager to them, and or yes or no, and how to work with product owners and stakeholders to get the best possible outcome for a product. Then I wound up at CoSchedule and was directly working in product management there, and kind of worked my way up to the head of product there. Again, SaaS company, startup company, very rapidly growing. And I was able to take a lot of the skill set that I had from previous positions and just apply them there, while also learning every single day.
I can imagine. That sounds like, a long path. You were mostly self-taught, it seems, as well. So it's quite impressive that you taught yourself everything about like technology, from building websites to like interacting with the users and project management. I will ask you more about how you actually ended up in CoSchedule in a second. I just wanted to also say hello to the participants that have joined us. So I'm Amelia. I'm currently heading marketing at UserPilot, which is a tool that helps actually product managers and product marketing managers interact with their users in-app and, like walk them through the product, facilitate the onboarding by in a kind of more modern and interactive way than the old school product tools. So that's why we're having, successful product managers and product marketers on these calls to chat a bit about the career, about the role, and how you are overcoming the challenges of interacting with the users and helping them actually adopt the products, digital products, which is, from my experience at least, not easy at all. And the more complex the platform, the more difficult it is to get the users to succeed with it, to use it the way it was designed, right? And also to design it the way that is useful for the users. So it's sort of like burning the candle at both ends. And I will definitely ask you about that as well. But, let's talk a little bit more about, why CoSchedule. How did you, enter this startup? Because at this point, it was still pretty much a startup, right? Would you say?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think a lot of people who work in technology, in the technology industry, especially if you've worked in a smaller, Fargo is a smaller area. but it is a technology hub in the upper Midwest of the United States. And I am a very outgoing person, so I did a lot of networking. And I think you'll find too that project manager and product manager personality types are sometimes a little bit more gregarious. So I wave my hands a lot when I talk. So
So do
there was
I, high five.
there was an individual named Ben, who was a really great friend of mine who worked in their marketing department, and said, "Hey, you know what? We're hiring for product managers." And I had not held that full title yet, but I knew in my heart, while I was in management leadership at the healthcare software company I was working for, I wasn't making things, and I wanted to make things, right? I kind of was hearkening back to when we were making websites, when I was working with developers making apps and things, and I think like my soul was missing some of that. So I applied and ended up going over there and working in their product management department. Product management in a startup is fascinating, right? Because it was a smaller company when I went over there. They were in a hiring phase, and I think it was about 50 or 55 or 60 when I went on.
When was
So
that?
Sorry.
When was that? That was
So
your.
that would have been 2017.
Oh wow. Okay.
So I think it's really kind of interesting, and this is something that I would say to anyone who's looking at getting into this industry, especially if you're looking at starting or applying at a startup, is, you know, the title might say product manager, but you're absolutely going to be doing that work, but you might also be doing a little bit of project management. You might also be helping in other areas of business too. And so the amount of exposure that you get when you start working for a startup at other areas of business, learning from other leaders in the business, learning from other people who are doing work like you are doing work adjacent to what you're doing, is really invigorating, really enriching. And I don't know, it honestly skyrocketed my career in the sense of I felt like I found a home with what I wanted to do. And I also started to find my niche where I was like, oh, this is it. This is what I'm supposed to be doing with my life. I've found it now.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of people can relate to, that they want to have an impact on the end users by actually building something meaningful that is going to help. Like in the case of SaaS companies like CoSchedule, you know, can be thousands or even tens of thousands of users, right? Full disclosure, like I used to work at a social media scheduling tool as well. So I can really relate to a lot of the things that you said. I have actually checked out CoSchedule around 2018, 19, because that's early 2019 when I joined PostFitty, which was another like a very similar tool, a social media scheduling tool. It was a super, super small startup. Free basically developers who, you know, like started from something really simple like scheduling covers for Facebook pages, right? That's how it started, and they got a bunch of users. It really like started taking off, and then they just sort of kept adding features until it sort of grew into a fully fledged social media scheduler. And they were like, okay, we have 5K MRR, like we have a social media scheduling tool. Now what, right? They had zero, you know, they probably didn't even know what a product manager is, right? They didn't know anything about marketing. So it was sort of just doing things, playing it by ear. And I joined them at that stage of the company. So I ended up actually working on a few features with them as well. Because as you know, with 5 people on board, you end up doing absolutely everything.
Yes.
But you know, having that experience, especially in social media scheduling department, also taught me, you know, how crowded and how cutthroat this market was. And I'm sorry if I've done that to you. I may have like taken some inspiration from your work in a CoSchedule. But we saw that happen all the time, that companies catering to pretty much the same audience end up copying a lot from themselves. And it's getting more and more difficult to differentiate in that market. How did you feel about that, working in specifically this industry with so much competition, so much pressure? Like, how did you even manage? I read somewhere you were growing like 500% on average for 3 years. So obviously, kudos,
Yeah.
that's huge success for the product, for the marketing team. But how did you feel about working in this industry specifically?
Yeah. And, that's a great question. And I might even generalize the answer, not even just about CoSchedule or the market or that particular industry, but I might even generalize the answer for any market, for any industry faced with that problem, right? Because I think software as a service over the last five years has gone through rapid transformation that you spoke of, right? And it all has to do with the product process, what the process that a product goes through from inception, and the maturity rate that it takes on when it's discovering like the problem it's trying to solve for a user, when it starts to hit its stride with that, with its early adopters, how it discovers the people who are their long-term users, the depth of the features that they're using, what really solves their problems, how you can really adapt to that. Whether or not your company, a company is falling into the trap of just adding on features to add on features as they're requested, or if the company is learning and maturing in the marketplace enough to understand what problems they really need to solve for the customer. And the product management discipline over the last 20 years has been on a path to mature itself more and more and more in that direction, right? And so that takes a concert of the product manager working with the product marketing manager, working with those who work directly with the users, if there's customer service, if there's experience managers, specific stakeholders, product owners, right? It's there is no exact one formula that can be applied for all of that. Then going back to what you were talking about earlier, how then do you take all of that and look at what other people in your market are doing, other companies in your market are doing, your competition, and not fall into the trap of trying to compete on their level and do every feature that they do, when in fact that might not be the best thing for your specific customer user base to solve their problem, right? So I think if I have a really big takeaway from what I learned from the co-founders that I worked with at CoSchedule, who acted a lot as the product owners that in a lot of the features or the core user feature development that we were doing, was the stark realization that it's madness to try to compete with everything out there, and what success is gleaned from is focusing on the user, focusing on making sure the user is successful, zeroing in on what solves their problems, and ensuring that their journey through the application and them getting the most out of the value out of their dollar is the number one priority. That reducing that distraction was key and a fantastic light bulb moment for me early on in my career there.
I feel like we could put this quote on the t-shirt, right? Like, don't focus on everything that is out there, like remove this distraction and focus on what is useful for your users specifically. So presumably at some point you had to make this decision: no, we're not going to look at what Hootsuite is doing, what Buffer is doing, what everyone else is doing. How was CoSchedule different in that? Like, how did you decide what to focus on, right? And is there any specific like feature or product update or release that you remember that really like moved the needle for you? And that was a result of this paradigm of not looking around, but focusing on what your users, really need. So I would love to hear the story, how you came up with something like that, if you can remember.
Yeah, and I think it is a generalized answer again. A lot of times in product development, when I'm speaking specifically about like what was the one thing that moved the needle forward, when I joined CoSchedule back in the day, it was 2017. I'm talking like it was 10 years. I don't know. It feels like a long time ago. It wasn't though that long ago. And even before, when I was working in healthcare software, this kind of applies there too. I joined when the core of the product was already built. And that was when it happening when I was working in healthcare software too. The core of the product is built. And so there was a level of maturity there that had already occurred or had already transpired. So the users had already that first wave of early adapters. A lot of product managers who are on the call or who may be watching this later kind of know that those waves that I'm talking about, where you've got that first wave of early adapters and you've got a little drop off and you get
Adoption curve, yeah.
Exactly, your adoption curve. And because I wasn't part of that, that's kind of the question you're asking. That's where that critical part happens sometimes. So much like the work I was doing when I was working in healthcare software, a lot of the features and enhancements that happen at that point don't move the needle like all the way so many past the 90-degree mark. A lot of times it's just very incremental ways that and incremental steps that you're taking the user on to improve their experience, improve solving their problems, deepen their connection and the stickiness, as it were, to the application, deepen the amount of information that they're able to glean from it, the amount of reporting, analytics, or things like that they can get out of the system. For example, in healthcare, the time when I was working there, that is when they called it Obamacare, right? But that's when those changes were happening in the United States. And so while that was a big change that needed to happen on the systems, after that, there were a lot of incremental enhancements that need to happen constantly to make it easier for claims, insurance claims, and things of that nature to process quicker for hospitals and for the insurance providers, right? So it's really hard to pinpoint things that throw things off the map after that kind of initial wave. So I don't have that one thing. I will say though, the CoSchedule application, one thing that does set it apart from social media scheduling software is CoSchedule really positions itself more as the content creation and the marketing suite, right? So it works more in concert with being able to create all your content in one place and then use ancillary social media and WordPress and things like that to get it out there. So it's more like the hub that helps the team collaborate or things like that. So I do think they've done a really good job of positioning themselves that way.
I was just about to use this word. Positioning is everything, right? Like the same with Nathan Barry, who founded basically, oh gosh, now it escapes me. That's embarrassing. Basically an email marketing tool for creatives, right? When you thought there's nothing to do in email marketing anymore, right? Because it's been sort of explored and penetrated so much by the MailChimps, MailerLites, etc. of the world. right? So he found that it's still possible to disrupt this basically industry by just changing the positioning for, having a tool specifically for creatives, for blog writers who need something that is more geared towards that use case, because email automation can be extremely complicated and not user friendly. But these mature products and mature markets where everybody knows what you're doing when you say what you're doing already, like, carry different set of challenges. And you mentioned like a lot of these secondary features, right? Like improved analytics that are driving more and more value. And what I feel working with complex B2B SaaS platforms on the daily basis is that a lot of them don't really push their users to explore these secondary features that may drive more value. And sometimes it's even frustrating for me, right? Because, for instance, I'm using Ahrefs for keyword research and like tracking my keywords, et cetera, et cetera. And it's such a robust platform, but I don't know what I don't know. And that's the thing, like, maybe they're running some webinars, but like we can't keep tabs on all the companies that we're using, all the tools we're using.
Right.
So
yes.
Did you experience that challenge in CoSchedule as well, that there were like features that were definitely useful? You knew that there is a segment of users that is deriving value from them, but they were just like kind of difficult to push to new users.
Well, I think at the heart of every product manager's, especially if you're the head of product, the thing that you're thinking about in the back of your mind is retention too, right? And so your product marketing manager, your head of marketing, will be doing all this work, sitting next to the cubicle or in the office next to you, be doing all this work to bring people in to buy the product. And then once they're in there using it, the product team and the feature set is there to keep them there, right? And of course, depending on the type of product, whether or not it's fully self-serve, whether or not there's a component of self-serve, or there's customer experience managers associated with it. Again, like whatever target user that you have, or like you said, how you're positioning yourself, or whatever market you're going after. But retention is a huge part of how SaaS over time really makes money, right? So it is in the product's best interest to deepen the user's feature set usage, right? So I found it, not just me, the entire company, when I was working with CoSchedule, I learned there a lot that partnering with product marketing and working with product owners to learn user behavior and learn how to coax them into adapting other product features was key to long-term success and retention. And so there's different ways to approach that, right? So the first thing you have to do is know and understand how they're using your product. If you're not getting that data and information and analyzing that on a regular basis, you're flying blind. And that sounds like the most basic thing to say out loud, but sometimes people aren't tracking that or looking at those things, right? Like, what is the daily active use in this area? What are users doing here? How often do they go into this? Like you said, have they been clicked in this and gone into, what features do you not do or not know about? And then what are the tools then? How do the tools work in concert with each other for communication at that point? Like, what things in app can we use to alert them to and bring them through a tutorial on how to use? Like, how can we guide them through using a certain part of the application so that they get the best out of it? Are there emails that we can send them to help them to click into their, hey, did you know that this exists, that you can use this more? And then how do we remind them after the fact that they did go into there and now it's time for them to start using that again? And I think the more that you can automate that process, the better it is for the team to ensure that users are exposed to those things, right? So that's key to the success of this. And then, of course, constantly setting goals for where you want that to be and constantly challenging yourself to reach and meet those goals with that. I think a question that occurs a lot in the product universe is who is responsible for that adoption, right?
That was supposed to be my next question. Yeah.
Right? Is that the product manager or the product marketing manager? And I know if somebody held a gun to my head and said, answer that question, who is it? And I want to say it's both. It's not though. I think it's different in different SaaS companies, right? There are a lot that product marketing owns, mainly because of the communication level that's needed for that. But once they're a customer, there's a lot that the product management and the product team owns just in and of itself. So that's a non-answer. Sorry.
Yeah, well, customer success also owns part of it when you think about it. So it's sort of a cross-functional task, really. I talked to a VP of product marketing in another SaaS that's around like 35 employees today, and he said, oh yeah, it's product actually that does that, not product marketing. And we do a lot of the things that traditionally you would think the marketing department would do. But then he's like, I want to wrangle this out of product because MQLs are my KPI. So what if I bring all these leads and they sign up for the trial, if then they don't convert because, for instance, product didn't have enough time to spend on this in-app messaging, right? While they were busy like doing more customer interviews and like planning for new releases. So that's also a common scenario that I see. But, like our CEO actually started to use a pilot by mistake. He was building a chatbot solution that was like a completely different use case, but he didn't have anything to, onboard people and automate this process, as you mentioned. So it becomes more efficient. So yeah, it's interesting, like that you mentioned it as well. But, with the pushback that we often get from product people, is that, it just doesn't make sense to try to get people to adopt these features that they haven't nationally adopted and explored beyond, the news onboarding. So once they have the bread and butter, right, let's leave them to their own devices. What do you think about that?
Well, I think it's probably easy for product people to say that because normally that team normally consists of a lot of technical people who like to execute, right? So it's probably difficult sometimes for them to get into the mindset of trying to speculate or trying to what's the word I'm looking for, solve that type of problem on the front end, right? They're very good at being given the plan for that problem and executing on that. But that's where I feel like in SaaS companies, especially in the startup space, are constantly wrangling with that problem. And it's such a slippery one within the first few years of their business that I don't know it. I think it's okay that it's a little bit messy the way that you explained. I think when companies are starting to ask that question between themselves, where the heads of department are starting to argue over who owns something, and argue, I mean nicely, very, very professionally, but start to go back and forth over who owns something, or start to question whether or not something should be done further, or like we were talking about, either automation or more transparency into visibility into how users are interacting with things. That's actually really healthy discussion. And I think it starts to naturally work itself out. And I do think that you're not going to see many SaaS companies doing it exactly the same.
Yeah, it's also like, product-led growth is such a catchphrase these days, but
Yes.
I feel by ignoring, the kind of secondary onboarding and like ignoring what you also mentioned, this experimental mindset. This is actually something that I was writing about in my newsletter today. Having the mindset of constantly iterating on, your product experiences for the users is something that is going to ultimately contribute to this product led growth. So, for instance, account expansion. So, yes, I may not churn as Ahrefs user, for instance, because I am using the core features pretty regularly, but I may have as well upgraded my account if I had, experienced even more value and explored the product further. So, the fact that there is absolutely nothing to lead me towards these advanced features and like get even more value out of the product means that, yeah, I may stick around, but I'm not likely to upgrade.
Yeah.
um Even if your pricing is purely like just usage based, right? Then you can still like help your users, increase their usage by, onboarding them on other value driving features. um yeah, that's something. Have you been running like these product experiments in CoSchedule? I wonder that would.
Oh, absolutely. There is a ton of that. And I think that's the other thing too. Um, a lot of SaaS companies, I mean, and anyone that I've ever talked, any product manager that I talked to from on a pure basis is is doing exactly what you're talking about, where their user first time user onboarding has maybe an A, B, or C different path to see how well they do through their onboarding and to track their journey and their behavior afterwards to see how successful they are and to see how long they stay
Mm.
within the application and to so over time to see which one performs the best, right? There's a lot of testing uh, within the applications um, of different, just I mean, things as simple as like how a button or a different function may perform, just to see if it gets clicked better, right? Things as simple as that occur often, all the time. Honestly, I think it's a situation of if you aren't constantly doing that, you're kind of starting to deteriorate and you're dead in the water if you're not watching and following to see how your users are interacting from that perspective. Companies have been doing that for years with different tools on the front end uh, to see how users convert, right? So if you've been funneling them through an entire experience to get them to either trial your product or to purchase the product or either of the above, you probably, with your Ahrefs experience, you were probably in an A, B, or C bucket through that entire journey, and you didn't know it, right?
Quite
Because
possibly.
something probably way different if I were in the same trial, which and they're gaining all that data to see what converts the best, and it gives the product and the product marketing team so much valuable information,
Mm.
both from that funnel marketing funnel perspective, and if you're doing that within the product too, where applicable. I mean, don't test just to test, right? Like there's some places where it does not apply at all, but there are definitely opportunities within the product to see where that works the best for you.
Yeah, you need to have a hypothesis, right, that is going to be tied to a business goal in order to test anything. Like, absolutely. But you just
And you
made
need to
me.
watch it. Yeah. And you need to
Mm,
watch it. I think that's the
yeah.
other part of it too, is somebody paying attention to what's going on. If you've got a mature developed product, like you said, tying to specific initiatives, organizers your goals to a level to where those are tied directly to it, and making sure that you have KPIs and specific specific goals you need to reach to get to what you want to consider success, or know when you can wave the white flag and call it a failure, is very important.
Mm, yeah, yeah, totally. And well, also, even a failed experiment is the learning, right? That can reveal tons of valuable insights for you. So, yeah, I just realized I might have been in Ahrefs control group. But
Exactly.
if any one of you guys in the audience needs some help with setting up product experiments, I'm running a little study next year, which will be ROI of user onboarding, so a little product placement. I will be setting up like a couple of these in-app experiments for free for you, centered on feature adoption, and then like seeing basically how that translates into higher trial to paid conversion rate. So, ping me if you want to take part. And in the meantime, if you have any questions to Kelly, this is the best time to ask. I have one more question from one of our audience members from my email list who I think didn't manage to make it here, Emma. So kind of more related to career development and continuous professional development as a product manager. How do you figure out what to do when you have no idea what you're doing, right? And do you have a council of like advisors or peers that you go to when you're feeling stuck as a PM? And how, if so, how did you manage to build this group, the support group?
Yeah. So when I started working at CoSchedule, I was scared because that was the first time I was specifically holding a product management title. Before then, I had worked in program management, project management, and you could argue very strongly that sometimes those things overlap depending on where you're at. But one thing that I did was I reached out to other product management members in the community, and I would take them out for coffee once in a while and literally just kind of gut check with them on, especially if they worked in the same industry with me. And I would just talk, and I'd just be like, hey, here's some of the challenges that I'm kind of seeing that are happening with me at work. Have you encountered this before? And you'll kind of find as you grow in your career that a lot of the challenges that you encounter aren't necessarily unique. They may feel very unique to you. The challenges are really kind of the same. The flavor changes a little bit, and finding someone in the community that you can just kind of ping or even just vent to once in a while is really healthy. But the way you break that barrier, introduce yourself, is I literally searched on LinkedIn and asked them if I could buy them a coffee over 30 minutes. Now, I kept those relationships going over COVID. I would just ask them if they wanted to have like a 15 to 30-minute chat over Zoom. And you'll be surprised that you will find people that are very willing to do that. Product managers and product manager communities are sometimes small, especially if you're specifically working in SaaS software or in software development. Depending on where you're at, that may be a small community. So they may be very willing to get together and work if you want to meet in person. Otherwise, you can just reach out to people online and specifically request, hey, I'm trying to break into this industry. Can I buy you a coffee? Can I buy you a virtual coffee? Can we hang out for 15 minutes? I also, my background before I got deeper into project management or product management, was project management. And I took something that really filled my passion is I really like Agile. I love the Agile methodology. I love lean software development processes. I love Scrum. So I got my certifications. And one thing I recommend to you, if you're on this call or if you're watching this, is that if you're newer in the industry, you're trying to meet people, or you want to sharpen your skill set, going for a weekend or going online to get your certifications, I think is a very fulfilling and enriching experience for yourself. And it helps you with becoming more accustomed to how this industry works and creates things from a product perspective. That
Hmm.
was my other recommendation.
Sounds like, yeah, getting certified in Agile or Scrum could be good, like transitioning, to into product management from a different career, like say in engineering or in marketing, even, right? To, as you said, like understand how the industry works. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Kelly. Do we have any questions from the audience, guys? Kang, Sarah, Tamara, Jessica, Heather, no questions? We're running over time a little bit. Okay, there is a question. Heather is asking, can you share some job titles that aren't product managers, but roles related to product market fit, adoption, implementation and onboarding, customer journey mapping, etc.?
Sure. So a lot of people who end up going into product management, I'll answer the question this way. A lot of people who end up with a product manager title can kind of come from different areas in a product community. And so product UI UX designers are great ones that and literally can be, with larger organizations, can be hired literally that title that you just said with it as the UI UX or user journey title, where that's literally their job, that's what they work on. Sometimes people who work in a more traditional software development company work as business analysts. I've seen people make that transition over into product management too. It is kind of akin to each other in the sense that the focus is on the user, the focus is on working software, the focus is on trying to break down scope to get out there. Product management elevates things to look at their larger picture all the time, where business analysts are focusing on the micro focus of the scope. So it's quite a shift, but I've seen that as well. And other related titles in the product management biome are literally like product marketing managers, if you want to go onto the marketing side of the house. Those roles are very kin to each other. Product managers, they just tend to lean towards a little bit more technical and a little bit more towards executing. Product marketing managers, obviously, I mean, that's right in the title, have the marketing background in it. I kind of talked about at the beginning of this, I come from a project management background. Truthfully, in the SaaS industry, I haven't run across too many people that come from my background. I have run across more technical people, more engineers, software engineers that have made the flip over to product managers as well. So those are just a few. I think it also kind of depends on the problem being solved. You don't necessarily have to have touched code or designed in the past to be able to be a product manager, although it does help.
Yeah, as we chatted before this interview, like I even know someone who used to be a stylist in an apparel company and then moved into product management and then senior product management within the same company. So it's not like the doors are closed because you entered through a specific channel. Brilliant. So do we have any more questions? Looks like can the product manager and the UX designer be the same role? There's another one from Kang.
In smaller companies, I've seen that.
Mm,
Yes. Kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier, where there were like maybe 5 or 10 people in a company trying to develop a product, develop features and solve the problem. I've definitely seen that before.
it sounds like you don't think it's an optimal solution, though.
No, it's not optimal because long term, you want your product manager to be in a position to be, you want your product manager thinking ahead of the rest of the team, right? You want your product manager trying to predict what's coming next. And your UX designer is literally executing the work in the moment and trying to get the work out the door. So I think that creates a little bit of a dichotomy there and splits the brain a little bit, but experimentation and scrappiness is the heart of software and technology. And that's why I'm like, yeah, I wouldn't, you got to start somewhere and you got to start somehow, right?
Yeah, it sounds definitely like this person would have to do a lot of context switching between, like planning and talking to people and then actually thinking. And it's also a different skill set, right? To know how to translate the insights from the customer interviews, right, into actually what's best in terms of UX and their design. Yeah. Cool. Awesome. So it sounds like we don't have any more questions. Thank you so much, Kelly. Thank you so much, guys. If you want to connect with Kelly, if you just remember something you forgot to ask now, I'm sure she would be happy to talk to you on LinkedIn as well.
Yeah, search for me on LinkedIn.
Yeah, thank you, Heather, for the kind words, and thanks all of you. I will see you on LinkedIn as well. And then there is another interview coming up in January with our CEO of Brand24, which is also related to social media. That's social media monitoring. So
yeah,
we'll have a follow-up. Great. Have a great rest of the day, Kelly, and all of you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.